I'm Alice Newland, President of the League of Women Voters of Manatee County. It is our pleasure to welcome you to our 2023 Running for Local Office workshop. We will go till noon with 2 10-minute breaks where you will be in a breakout room with 4 or 5 others. You can run to the bathroom or get a drink, but we encourage you to join the group, introduce yourself, talk and share with others in the group. We will also be posing a question at the start of each break session that relates to the prior presentation. This workshop is being recorded, and the recordings are the property of the League of Women Voters of Manatee County and cannot be reproduced without written permission. On February 14th, the League will be 104 years old. Our mission has not changed in those 104 years. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization, encourages informed and active participation for citizens in government, and works to increase understanding on major policy issues and influences public policy through education and advocacy. The League is firmly nonpartisan and neither supports or opposes any parties or candidates for office. At the same time, it is a political organization and advocates on select policy issues after careful study and consideration by its members. In 1974, the League of Voters ended its policy of barring full membership to men. Men are members on an equal basis, and we invite men to join. We have 20% of our membership is men. This workshop is education and designed to inform the public and encourage active participation of citizens in government. Whether you are attending because you intend to run for office or assist others in the quest for office, you will learn something valuable today. You've received a workbook. The workbook is full of information. Be sure to read and refer to it. It has advice and experience from seasoned campaigners and experts. It includes, but is not limited to, the things you need to consider when deciding to run for office. The requirements for a local position you may be considering, a campaign timeline, mistakes and how to avoid them, and other resources, much, much more. Read the whole handbook before you begin your campaign. You may find pointers that improve your campaign or avoid a mistake. Today, we have expert, experienced speakers. You will receive practical information that you will need to be a successful candidate or help your candidate to be successful. You will get your questions answered and get questions you answered you didn't even know you had. We will be taking your questions in chat. At the conclusion of each segment, we will pose your questions. One of our co-hosts will pose your questions. Refrain from making statements and make sure that each one is a nonpartisan question. It is our hope that this program will encourage capable individuals to run for office. Also, if you enjoy the work we do, please consider joining the League of Women Voters. I'll let this continue ringing. The first of our segments today covers the candidate considerations by the Supervisor of Elections. Filing, reporting, keeping track of all the laws and limits, record keeping can consume all your time and effort. Without assistance and organization, keeping it all straight can easily lead to mistakes, fines, or not even making it on the ballot. Our speaker in the first segment is Scott Farrington, Assistant Supervisor Elections. Scott has served as Assistant Supervisor of Elections for Manatee County since January 2013. His extensive elections and information technology experience are vital to the current and future operations. He spent 10 years in Sarasota County in the Supervisor of Elections office, and beginning in 2000 with absentee voters and steadily progressing to positions of increased responsibility, including election equipment preparation, poll worker training, information technology, and ultimately assistant supervisor 2007 to 2010. 2 years prior to joining Manatee County Elections team, Scott worked as a software developer for Vertex Inc. in Sarasota. Scott was born in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and moved to Sarasota with his family in 1986. He graduated from Community Christian High School in Onico, Florida. He holds a BS in Information Systems Management from USF, Sarasota Manatee, and Master's in Managing Information System from USF, Tampa. Scott and his wife have one son, Jacob. Scott?
Thank you. I hope you have your coffee ready because there's a lot here and a short period of time. So we'll go ahead and get started. Wanted to
that's Mayor Titsworth who keeps getting in arguments with
I'm gonna let that conversation finish. If you want to go ahead and go to the next slide, just talk briefly about a couple of assumptions that we're going to stick to during this conversation, and that is we're going to focus on Manatee County and running for an election in Manatee County or a municipal level. And mostly we do that because the federal, the state, any multi-county offices, if an office covers more than one county or parts of more than one county, they have a few different rules and requirements. And they also, you would report to somebody totally different, and that's the Division of Elections. So for today, there's a lot of similarities, but we're going to focus on local elections. If you want to, thank you. First step is actually what we call filing as a candidate. And first, let's start with what you cannot do before you file. And that is take any money, take any contributions, spend any money. You cannot collect petitions until you file, and you cannot open a campaign bank account until you file as a candidate. So that leads to what can I do before I file? And the short answer is you can talk about it. And that's about it. You can talk to your friends about it. You can talk to consultants, anybody you want about whether you should file, whether you shouldn't run as a candidate, but you can't do anything basically that constitutes money. That's the big one, or petitions. Where do you file? And again, all of the offices we're talking about today, you file with the Supervisor of Elections office. There are a lot of offices that you would file with the Division of Elections, but all of the local ones you file with our office. And what does the filing process look like? It's actually incredibly simple. There's two forms that you have to file. It's a DSDE 9 and a DSDE 84. And of course, those are state forms. That's why they have such fancy names. And if you want, on the next slide, you'll actually see a sample of these forms. First one, the DSDE 9. It may look complicated, but it's really not. All you're doing is you're telling us your name, your address, what office you're seeking for, who's going to be your treasurer, and what bank you're going to use. And that's basically the gist of this one form. And then the next form is a form that you have to very simply say that you have read and understand, or at least you have read the statute regarding campaign finance, which is Chapter 106 of Florida statutes. Basically, you are agreeing that you are going to follow that, and you're signing this saying that I've at least read it and I understand it enough to follow it. I'll be honest, the understanding part, I'm not sure anybody completely understands it, but everybody at least needs to read it. All right, so now I'm a candidate. Now what? Well, this is the show me the money slide. This is where, okay, you filed your forms. What's the first thing you're going to do? And for most people, one of the first things they're going to do is they're going to have a campaign fundraiser, some sort of event or something. You've declared your bank, you've declared your intentions officially. Now you can start raising money and spending money. And of course, anytime you raise and spend money, there's reporting that goes along with that. So the next slide talks about the financial reporting and some rules that you need to follow. First one, big one, you can only collect $1,000 contribution per person per election. Does not apply to yourself. You can give your own campaign as much money as you want. But it does apply to what's called an in-kind contribution. And that is if you have a friend who can't really give you money, but they have a business and that business makes signs, for instance, and that your friend wants to give you signs instead of giving you money, that's absolutely acceptable. But you have to claim that as an in-kind contribution. And the value of that contribution still cannot exceed that $1,000 limit. So that's one thing that people sometimes don't realize, that people can give you, and they need to claim fair market value for that contribution. You can only accept up to $50 in cash per person. So if someone wants to give you a $100 bill, they cannot. If anything over $50 has to be a check. You must report the name and address for every contribution. Even the $50 cash contribution, you have to know the name and the address of the person who gave that to you. You cannot take any anonymous contributions. You must report the contributor's occupation for contributions over $100. That occupation can be anything from realtor to attorney to retired, but you must report the occupation. You need to file on time. There are automatic fines if any financial report is filed late, and that is something that is automatic. Our office cannot waive those fines. We legally are not allowed to. We must levy the fine. There are ways to challenge that fine, but that challenge does not go through our office. It actually goes to the state. And then if you went through and you didn't collect any money, you didn't spend any money during that period of time for that specific report, you would still have to file, and you file what's called a waiver. So how do you file these financial reports? And I'm not going to go into the details on this, but I did want to show you just a little quick screen. Our website, there's a spot where you can go. Once you file, we will give you a username and a password. You go in there and it tells you all of the reports that are and when they're due. You enter in the contributions, you enter in your expenditures, and then you basically just print the report. You don't have to sign and give us the report anymore. You can submit it digitally through the website. So it's all fairly self-explanatory. There's always situations that come up, and we of course will help you through those. But again, don't want to go into a lot of detail, but you need to keep on top of it. Don't wait till the end, because if you wait to the end, you're going to forget a contribution, you're going to forget an expenditure, something's going to happen. So just biggest advice I can give is keep on top of it. So how often do you have to file these reports? And so this is a list of all the reports that are going to be filed before the general election of 2024. And you'll notice the first section, they are monthly reports. And so if you were to file today, and today is January 21st, your first report would be due on February 10th, and it would cover the period of the first of the month to the end of the month. And of course, since you just filed today, you're only going to have activity for the end of the month. But from this point forward, every month you must file your report, and that goes all the way until May of next year. You will file these monthly reports, and then leading up to the primary, the reports get more frequent. It goes from once a month to basically every 2 weeks. And then right before the election, it becomes even more frequent. And then again, starts over before the general election, basically every 2 weeks. And then right before the election, it's basically the last report covers about 1 week before the election. Don't print this particular calendar out and use it as your guide. I made this very quickly, and I'm not 100% sure there are no mistakes in it. So don't use this as your guide when you file. and we give you the login. You can go in there and it has all of the reports listed for you. Use that as your guide. Petition versus qualifying fee. This is one of the first decisions you're going to have to make when you file. Filing is easy. It's two forms. Qualifying to become a candidate comes later, and it's a little bit harder. But you have a decision to make. You can either file by petition method or by paying the qualifying fee. And just on this slide, we're talking about the fees. And I will mention that these fees are actually from 2022. They're not, we don't know what the 2024 fees are yet, but I can tell you they're very close. It's based off of the salary. Till the salaries are released for this year, we won't know what the 2024 exact fee is, but it doesn't change that much year over year. So if you would look at a Board of County Commission partisan candidate, the fee would be $5,504 and you'll notice a partisan candidate pays more than a nonpartisan candidate. That's because these fees, as much as I would like to say we get to keep all these fees, we keep almost none of the fees. The fees are divvied out to the state and to the party. And so if you're filing as a partisan candidate, or in other words, if you're filing as a Republican or a Democrat, the party is going to get 2% of that fee. If you don't file as with any party affiliation, or you're running for, say, a school board candidate that has no, that you're not allowed to file it as a partisan, as a nonpartisan office, then you don't have to pay that extra 2%. So if you're a nonpartisan candidate for county commission, it's a considerably cheaper at $3,676. And then school board, like I said, it doesn't really matter. You cannot file as for a party. And again, it's based off of salary. School board members make less, so they have to pay less in a qualifying fee. Now, special districts are a little different. They're community development districts, fire districts, mosquito control districts, those kind of things. It's set at $25. A lot of these districts don't even get paid. And if they do, it's very, very little. So they're all set at $25 for their fee. Municipalities are another deal altogether. Every municipality gets to set their own fee. So depending on which municipality you're looking to run for, you'd have to check and see what the fee is for that. They range from about $50 up to about $400, just depending on if you're looking what race and what municipality you're looking to run for. So let's talk about the petition side. You had an option, and if you want to pay the fee, that's the fee. If you want to go by petition, that's on the next slide. There we go. You have to, in order to avoid paying that fee, you can collect petitions. And the number of petitions you need to collect is dependent upon which race you want to go for. But either way, you have to pay 10 cents per petition for a verification fee. And you must collect an amount equal or greater to than 1% of the registered voters of the district being sought. So again, an example, a countywide candidate, this would be for one of the at-large Board of County Commissioners or the Sheriff's Office or something like that. You would have to collect 2,806 petitions. If you think about it, 10 cents per petition, that's about $280. It's quite a bit less than the qualifying fee, but it's quite a bit more work. The Board of County Commissioners, this next election is in 2024. Districts 1, 3, and 5 are up for election, and you can see their quantity ranges from 550 up to 680. And again, it depends on how many registered voters are in that district. School board districts 1 and 3 would either be 633 or 579 petitions. Again, it's obvious that the cost is less, but the work is more. You have to get those petitions. And so that's just something you'll have to decide which way you would want to go. Special districts, again, the CDDs, fire districts, there are 25 petitions. So you either pay $25 or you get 25 petitions. Excuse me. There is a required petition format you must use. You don't have to worry about that too much right now, but just know you can't use your own. You have to use one that is provided for you. And all of your petitions must be submitted by May 13th of 2024. And that means submitted to our office. And that's your deadline to submit them. We have until the first week of June to verify them. We ask that you don't, if you need 2,800 petitions, we ask that you don't come into us with 2,800 petitions on May 13th, because I promise you some of those will not be good and you're going to be stuck. We ask also that if you are going to do petitions, you give us a few at a time, so that, and by a few, I mean several hundred, but don't just drop 2,800 on us. If you can avoid that, give us 500, and work your way up. This way you can kind of see how it's going, how many you have left, things like that. And it also gives us an opportunity to kind of spread the work over some time. Back to municipalities, each one again can set their own standard, how many petitions. And some of the municipalities, you can't use petitions to avoid the qualifying fee. You have to pay the fee and collect petitions. And most of them, you're talking anywhere between 10 and 50 petitions. None of them have thousands of petitions. They're, like I said, most of them are like 10 petitions. Some of them are 25, and one particular municipality is in the 50s. Actually, the city of Bradenton is even a little higher than that, but it's still in the hundreds. It's not the thousands. All right, so next we're going to talk about qualifying. You're almost there. You've done all of this work, but you are not officially a candidate on the ballot yet, and you will not be a candidate that gets their name on the ballot until you qualify. You must qualify on time, or you will not be a candidate. When do you qualify? So for 2024, qualifying week starts June 10th at noon and ends June 14th at noon. Judicial candidates, if you wanted to run for one of the county judge seats, they have a different filing time frame, but they're the only ones locally that do. You can pre-file up to 2 weeks in advance, which basically means you give us all the paperwork, everything 2 weeks before June 10th, and we hold it. We'll look over it, make sure we don't see anything obvious, but we will hold it until that period. June 14th at noon is a hard deadline. And what I mean by that is we cannot legally make an exception. If you have not turned everything in and it's not correct by June 14th at noon, you are not qualified. So we highly recommend that you don't wait till June 14th at noon, because if there's an issue, there's no time to fix it. If we find an issue and you came in 2 or 3 days before, we're going to notify you as soon as we see the issue and ask it for it to be fixed. And as long as you fix it before the deadline, you're still a candidate. It always surprises me at how many people come in on June 14th at 10, 11, or even 11:30. And sometimes they get it done in time and sometimes they don't. But either way, that is the deadline. Next slide. Where do I file? Again, all of the offices we're talking about, you're going to file in our office. And what do you file? First, everything has to be what's called in hard copy, which basically means you cannot email us the forms. You can't print the forms out, sign them, scan them, email them to us. You can't fax them to us. Someone must bring the forms to our office. If you haven't already filed the first 2 forms we talked about at the beginning, you have to file those. And then you must either file your campaign check for the qualifying fee or proof of petitions. If you do collect all your petitions, we're going to give you a letter saying that we have verified and certified that you have completed your petitions. We'll hold on to that as a copy of that as well, but that's your proof of collecting the petitions. You must sign an oath, a candidate oath, and depending on the office and the type of the office, the oath is a little bit different, but you have to file one of those forms. And then you have to file a Form 1 or a Form 6, and those are financial statements. Form 1 is a very simple front and back one page that basically all you have to do is tell us or tell the public where your income comes from. You don't have to say how much it is. You just have to say basically who are your employers, what investments do you have, where are they. Does not indicate the values of them. A Form 6 is a much more complicated document where not only do you have to indicate where your income comes from, you have to indicate how much your income is, how much you have in the bank, how much your mortgage is, how much money you owe on any item. So basically, it's a list of all of your assets and liabilities. The Form 1s are what you would file if you're running for a special district like CDD or fire district. A Form 6 is what you would file if you're running for county commissioner or sheriff or one of those offices. And you don't have to worry necessarily about which one you're going to file, but it might make a determination. If you're not comfortable with having all that information public, you may not decide you want to run. Municipalities may have additional requirements, and most of them do. Some of them have you must live in the district for a certain amount of time before you can run, requirements like that. And you'll have to just check with us or check with the municipality on what additional requirements they may have. Next, we're going to talk about a few common mistakes that we see, unfortunately, a little too often. The first one is not filing your financial report on time. So there is like I said, an automatic fine, and it's $50 a day for the first 3 days, and then it jumps to $500 per day every day after. There are limits based on how big your campaign is, how much money you're bringing in or spending, but just note that, again, we cannot waive those fines. It doesn't matter what the reason is. Even if it's the best reason in the world, we must levy those fines, and then you have to take it up with the Florida Elections Commission, and they can waive the fines, but I can tell you they very rarely waive fines. It's understood. You have to file these reports. You sign that paper saying you read Chapter 106. They almost never waive these fines. The report immediately prior to an election instantly starts at $500 a day. So the closer you get to the election, that report right before the election, if you're late on that, the very first day, it's going to be $500. And then the next day, it's $1,000. Another common mistake, or not terribly common, but it has happened, and that's using a personal check to qualify. When you qualify with us, and if you're going to pay that qualifying fee, you cannot use a personal check. You must write us a check off of the campaign account. The only exception to that are special districts. I'm not going to go too deep into that, but that $25 I told you about, if you're running for a CDD or you want to run for a CDD and you've already decided, I'm just going to run, I'm not going to spend any money, I'm not going to collect anything, you can pay with a personal check. But that's the only exception to that, are those special districts. Not including a disclaimer or having an improper disclaimer on your campaign materials. The statute dictates exactly what the disclaimer should say, and it's a little different depending on what type of office, if it's a nonpartisan office or a partisan office. But if you print those signs and you forget to tell the printer to put that on there, you'll have a bunch of signs that you're either going to have to go back and fix, or you can't use, or other materials. If you pass out flyers or you have something on Facebook, there is a disclaimer that needs to be on all of your campaign materials. Other issues that we see, mostly relating to finances, taking larger cash or anonymous contributions. Like I said at the beginning, $50 cash. You cannot take a $100 bill. And this law in particular is different in other states, and has changed over time. The cash amounts have gotten lower and lower and lower. And right now they sit at $50. Once upon a time, before I was in elections, at least in Florida, and I guess it's still allowed in some states, you could have what they called a fishbowl campaign fundraiser, which was basically, you had a party, people came in, you had a big fishbowl or a fish tank in the middle of the room, people would come and throw cash into it. Well, that's a big no-no. And so you cannot take anonymous contributions, and you cannot take cash larger than $50. Not reporting the contributor's occupation. When you get that check, sometimes people will put it in an envelope and just kind of pass it to you. And sometimes you know them really well and you know what their occupation is. Sometimes you don't. But either way, in order to take that contribution, you must get their occupation. And then not balancing. This goes back to keep up with it. If you miss a contribution, but on the report, but it goes into the bank, when it gets down to the end of it, you're going to be $100 over or $100 less, however it works. And that's a problem. You've got to balance. When it comes out at the end, you start, your bank account started with zero, it has to end with zero. And then the last one is not properly reporting in-kind contributions. People frequently forget about in-kind contributions and what they are, and that they even have to do anything with it. And it really does go to the depth of, if you've run before and you had signs created and you put those signs up in a storage locker or in your garage, and then the next campaign comes around and you want to use those signs again, you can. But that's a contribution you just made to yourself, and it's an in-kind contribution. And if someone else has, tells you, I got a bunch of 2x4s in my shop, I'm never going to use them again, you take them. You can take them, but you need to claim them, and you need to claim them at fair market value. And that contribution is still set at $1,000. So those are some of the common mistakes. There are others, of course, and there's a lot of weird circumstances that happen, but for today, I think that covers most of the big stuff. And so that's all I have. If anybody has any questions, I would be happy to try and answer them.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Cheryl, do we have any questions in chat?
Yes, we do. Yes, thank you. And Scott, thank you for that very, very excellent presentation. Oh my goodness, that's a lot of information. Let's see, the first question comes from Colleen Friedman. Is there a team that verifies the information on all the forms?
I'm assuming when she says all the forms, she's talking about the forms, like the filing forms that come to us during qualifying. Is there a team? We do have people that checks those forms, but the court has basically determined that our office is an administrative office, which basically means we are not allowed to look outside the four corners of the form. It's another legal term that they like to use, but it basically says if the form is filled out completely and there is nothing on that form that is a problem, for instance, your address, we are not legally allowed to go and check to see whether you live at your address. The bank, if you tell us that's the bank you're using, that's the bank we're going to assume you're using. If that's your treasurer, those types of things. So we check them, but we check them more for completeness and accuracy than we do whether or not the information you gave us is true, if that makes sense.
Right. Thank you. The next question is there still the optional pre-qualifying period of about 2 weeks in the lead up to the actual qualifying week, where candidates can file all their documents ahead of time and avoid the rush?
There is a pre-qualifying period, and it is exactly 2 weeks. And we do encourage anybody, especially first-time candidates, to utilize that period. What that does is it basically gives us an opportunity to look over everything, make sure there wasn't something missed, make sure you didn't use a personal check instead of a campaign check, make sure that you filed the correct the oath of office. Like I said, there's like 6 different ones to choose from. If you come to us, we'll make sure and give you the right one. If you go out and they're at the state's website, if you go and take it on yourself and fill it out, we'll make sure that you at least grab the right one. So there is a 2-week period where they call it pre-qualifying. We look at the paperwork, look to make sure is complete, and then we hold it until the qualifying period begins, and then we qualify you.
Thank you. The next question is from Ruth Lawler. What about PAC contributions? The rules around that?
PAC contributions, if we're talking about a political action committee contributing to a candidate, is what I'm assuming. The rules around what you can contribute to political committee are totally different than what I just described. So the limits are different, the timeframes are different, everything is different for contributing to a political committee and their rules. For a political committee to contribute to a candidate, it depends on the political committee, but generally speaking, the question was, what are the rules surrounding that? Is that the question?
It looks like maybe Ruth can qualify that word. It looks like riles, or RILES. So I read it as rules.
Okay. So
Rules.
the
word is rules, Scott. What are the
Okay.
rules about that?
The rules are, for a political committee, the rules are basically the same. Their limitations are the same. They cannot give you more than anybody else. They're an entity.
All right. And then from Jane Christensen, Scott, please clarify that you can contribute more than $50.
You can contribute up to $1,000 to a candidate, but only $50 can be cash. Anything above that $50 must be in the form of a check.
Okay, great. So here's a question for me. And there's a lot of steps a candidate has to go through. And so what percentage of the applicants actually succeed at completing all the steps and running for office?
It's pretty high. I mean, so there are a lot of people that file and do not qualify, but I would say the majority of the people that file and do not qualify decided they just didn't want to run. It's not because the number of steps or the amount of work it takes was the prohibitive factor. It is a lot, and I don't want to overwhelm anybody. It's really not that hard. The forms themselves are not that hard. It's just you might have to be sure you do that, and you do it completely and on time. And we're going to help you. If you're not sure, call us. We'll tell you which form. We'll have you come in actually, and we'll give you a packet. You tell us what office you're interested in. We will give you a packet specifically designed for that office that has all the correct forms in it, that has other information that you're going to want to know as well. So most of the people that don't qualify because they've chosen not to run, not so much because of the process. Great.
Scott, thank you again. And that's it for all these questions in the chat at this time.
I hope you're returning energized and ready for the next segment, campaign strategies. What do you do to convey a winning message? What publicity do you need? How do you organize your office, your team? How do you fundraise? All these tasks can be daunting, but they're necessary. We have an excellent strategist here who has the experience to answer these questions for you, Andre Torkelson. For the questions on this one, please put your questions in chat, but this time put it in for Colleen Friedman. Andre Torkelson was inspired to start Torque Consulting from the respect of the political process, deep-rooted patriotism, and a desire to help individuals and businesses when they are in the most need of guidance. Torque was the name affectionately used by fellow soldiers in the U.S. Army. Andre brings 18 years of political consulting, public relations, and crisis management experience to the company. So, Andre, it's all you.
Hey, everybody, and I want to apologize right off the bat. I have tried 2 computers, and neither one of them are letting me have any video. So I'm so sorry. You guys are just going to have to imagine I'm much more handsome than you probably have seen before. Just imagine that. I'm going to go with that. So sorry about the video. I've tried a couple times. So let's get going, though. Like she mentioned, I'm Andre Torkelson. I'm going to, is it possible for me to go ahead and share my screen here? Okay. Let's see.
We're not seeing anything yet.
Okay. How about now?
Yes. Yay.
Yay. Okay. Awesome. All right, so as she mentioned, I'm Andre Torkelson. I own Torque Consulting. Throughout the years, I've worked with other consulting firms as well, if you've ever heard my name out there. And today we are going to talk mainly about strategy. We don't have a ton of time, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the strategy and social media and how to handle tax and all of that good stuff. And I'll go as quickly as I can with as much information as I can. And at the end, please definitely ask me lots of good questions. So a little bit about me. I've worked for Republicans and Democrats. I've worked on candidates and referendums, and some examples of those are all the way up in Duval County. Just here in 2022, I worked on the ad valorem millage rate change for schools, a 1/2-cent sales tax for schools in Duval. 2020, I've worked over in Pensacola area on a parks issue. I've worked in Manatee and Sarasota County on school issues. Sarasota County, they both of their, actually 3 times on their school taxes down there. So lots of referendums down there, all the way down to St. Lucie County on referendums, and kind of in between the state everywhere. And then lots of candidates in between. I'm currently working in Jacksonville right now because they have off-year spring municipal elections. So I'm in Jacksonville at the moment. And I've also worked in Southern Minnesota. We moved to Southern Minnesota because my wife needed some care at the Mayo Clinic. We love it here. And so I worked on 4 school board races here this last November. And yeah, so kind of all over the place. I have a lot of good history. And I've worked on all aspects of the campaign. I've done everything from pretty much all the consulting, strategy, message development, budgeting, everything, right? From all of that to sometimes on campaigns, I will be hired on for pieces of the campaign. Maybe I'm only doing your voter targeting or social media, things like that. So kind of all over and everything in between. Oops. So I wanted to talk real quick about the elephant, and I didn't want to leave out the donkey in the room. And that is, when it comes to strategists and political party affiliation. And I just wanted to mention, you might have seen I've worked with Republicans and Democrats. I am a moderate. So I work with moderate Republicans and moderate Democrats. I don't really do anything on the far right or the far left. That's just me personally. There are consultants out there that specialize with those types of candidates. And if you're one of those types of candidates, I would just highly advise you guys to find the consultant that matches your ideology, because they're going to serve you best in the long run. There have been moments in my career where I have branched out and worked with candidates that were a little bit too far one way or the other for me. And I felt like it was hard for me sometimes to message them and speak their language with the voters. And so I think that is an important point that needs to be made. It's up to you whether you care if a consultant has worked on both sides. I will say on the consultant side, it can be a little difficult because the parties don't want you, right? Like the Democratic Party doesn't really want candidate or consultants as much that work with Republicans, and vice versa. Certain areas of communities that are more Republican or Democrat might find a little more leeway there with the consultants, but some areas where they have if it's strong Dem or strong R, they're going to push out consultants that will work on the other side. But as far as the candidates go, that's up to you. All right, so today we're going to talk about the campaign strategy, social media / digital. And I mentioned digital because it is different than social media, and we're going to talk about that. The non-digital advertising, how to handle attacks, and the campaign setup and structure. All right, so for the campaign strategy portion, I am highlighting 4 different areas here. And I just want to mention that there are many facets to campaign strategy. These definitely are, my top 4, but there's not enough time to go over all parts of campaign strategy. And these are also not in any particular order. So I just want to mention that. Number 1 doesn't mean messaging is your most important.
You're being neglected.
And similarly, number 4, fundraising isn't your least important. So, I gotcha. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, sorry, I
Okay.
was trying, there was some background noise.
Background noise. So, okay. So I was just saying, in case you didn't hear me, these aren't the top, not in any order. They're just my top four. All right. So let's start with messaging just to move right along. All right. So for messaging, the most important thing is you must learn your likely voters and your district that you're running in. And I'm using district, just kind of broadly here. And let's say it's a county, for example, you need to understand who the likely voters are. And I highlighted likely because likely voters and registered voters are not necessarily the same thing. You may have a district or a community where it leans slightly Democratic, but when you break down who actually comes out to vote and who's likely to vote in that particular election, it may actually end up skewing Republican or vice versa. So I just wanted to point that out, and that's going to be an important part. And obviously that comes down to your voter targeting. But that is an important point that you guys need to understand when it comes to your messaging. Also, polling helps, but it is expensive. And so if you can afford polling for your race, and I know that, that is very cost prohibitive in some cases, I would highly recommend the ability to do polling because and get a good pollster. Not, all polls are not created equal, as we've seen even on the national level. But get a really good pollster, and if you have a consultant, they can usually help you with that. Most of us have contacts with pollsters, but it is expensive. And for most races to have a good poll, you're probably going to spend at least $12,000, and that's a pretty cheap poll. So just putting that out there, they are expensive, but what you're going to get out of that is really invaluable data that you are saying to the voters what they want to hear and what they believe. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later, but an important place that you need to get to, because I'm not saying that what you need to do is find out what a poll says and you need to pretend you're what voters want to hear. What you need to do is actually find the place where what you truly believe and what the voters truly believe match up. And those are the places that you need to connect with them. I'm not saying to be something you're not. Also, keep it simple and direct. I actually just recently got on a campaign where the candidate had 10 different, messaging points with paragraphs of information under each of their messaging points. That's way too much. If anybody's going to read, 10 points and multiple paragraphs under each point, they're already going to vote for you. I guarantee it. You need small, short, digestible points. It doesn't mean that you don't have greater plans behind it, but be very simple and direct with your messaging. Don't send out like mailers with body copy, with multiple paragraphs on there. And then the last point I'll say on messaging is to use the 3 or 4-legged stool method. If you haven't heard of that method, the idea is that you have the seat of the stool, and that's your main messaging point. That's your kind of overarching messaging. And then underneath that, you're going to have the legs of the stool, and you can't have a stool sitting up without the legs, right? So you've got to have messaging points that support that main objective of your messaging point. So that's the idea behind that. Hopefully that all makes sense. Let's see. Oops. Sorry. All right. The next one is voter targeting. So there's a couple different ways you can handle your voter targeting. If you belong to one of the 2 major political parties, you can use their software system. For example, on the Democratic side, there's something called VAN, NGP VAN. That's an encompassing system there where you can get access to the voter file. You can look into the voters. You can look into their history. The Republican side has the same. So you can definitely get in there and look around and pick vote history, look at the voters, and then decide who you want to target. So that's one option. The other option is, and even if you belong to one of the two political parties, maybe you don't want to go that route. And if you don't, that's okay. The other option is, because I think both of them are charging subscriptions for that. If you're on a super tight budget or you're really trying to do some early work, the other thing that you can do is get the voter file from the Supervisor of Elections office, get it directly. And then the next key to that, though, is you either need to have your own database management skills, be able to use Excel well, have a friend who does, or hire someone. And the key there, though, is what you're going to want to do is get that voter file, and you're going to want to look closely at, and when you ask for the voter file, you're going to want to ask for this specifically. You're going to want to say, I want all active voters with vote history. So when you ask for it that way, that they'll give you, and usually it goes back like 20 elections. Almost every county now is on similar systems, and that's what you're going to get. If you want very specific elections, you can also ask for that. You can say, hey, give me all active voters in, district such and such that are Republican or Democrat or whatever. And I want to see these elections, vote history for these specific elections. I generally just say, hey, give me all voters, even if it's a district within a county, I'll say, give me all voters with vote history, and then I break it down from there. But if you're not as good with Excel, you can also ask for them to break that down for you a little bit further. And then the next level of that, though, is going to be, now you have all these voters and their vote history, but that doesn't necessarily mean they voted in those elections. So now you're going to want to go to that next level and look and see if they voted in these particular elections. So that's where that voter targeting stuff comes in. And I could go on, I could have a whole class on voter targeting. So I'm going to stop with it there, but there's a lot of stuff that you can do with the voter targeting, even just from the Supervisor of Elections, if you're not using the political party software system. The next thing is target realistically, right? So if they haven't voted in the last 5 election cycles, the chances of them coming out and voting in this next election cycle are slim to none. So leave them out. And the less money you have, the tighter that targeting needs to be. So really look at that voter file closely and decide who you're going to target, because maybe you only have enough money to go to the perfect voters. Maybe that's all you've got as far as, maybe mail goes, because mail is really expensive. Maybe you can say, hey, out of the last 5 elections that I'm targeting, I need the people that voted in every single one of them. And I will say that's not an ideal targeting, but it's something, right? And those people are probably going to come out and vote. And also know the field of competition, because it could be a situation where, depending on the field and what your party is and what your opposition looks like and what the electorate is looking like, you may need to target, and you might need to drop people out of there, even if they're perfect voters, right? They may be perfect voters, but they're likely to not be your voters. So drop them out. And I know that's hard for candidates. And even as consultants, sometimes it can be difficult for us to make, that call, because we think you might find ways to connect. And sometimes these races are won by 1% or 2% or just over 0.5%, right? We see that a lot. I've worked on those races. City of Bradenton, I worked on a mayor's race there, and we won by, I think it was like 30 votes. So I don't know if you remember that when Wayne Poston beat Bill Evers a long time ago. All right, so next up, voter outreach. So I'm going to go into some of these a little bit more, but mainly, fairly obvious, right? You have your paid stuff, mail, signs, TV, radio, billboard, social media, all that kind of stuff. And then you have your unpaid stuff. So that's your door knocking, your political party events, community events. And I put, you may have the cost for a booth, even at political party events, you may pay for a booth or something. And then phone calls with volunteers. So I'm considering that mainly unpaid stuff there, if you're using volunteers. And this is one of the most important things that you can be doing, is really strategizing out how you're going to handle your voter outreach. Because if you don't have money, you need to have volunteers. Okay, so that's an important point. If you don't have a lot of money, make sure you have a lot of people. It would be awesome to have both, have a lot of money and have a lot of people. Those are really successful races. And we all love those when we work on them from the consultant side, but that's just not honestly the realistic thing that you see a lot of times, especially in, these smaller down ballot races. So depending on what race you're looking at, these things can move around. So what I would highly recommend on the voter outreach side is strategize on what is the best thing for you, right? So let's say you have some money, but you don't have lots of money, but you also have some people. I would say where you're going to want to go is every community event you possibly can in your district, right? So if you're running for office in parish, you don't need to be going to community events down in Sarasota. Why? Why are you there? Even if there's a lot of people there, don't go there. Stay in your community. That's where you're going to meet the most people that are living in your district. Door knocking, key, huge. Door knocking, it's a big one, and it doesn't cost anything except for the materials that you're handing out. You can get volunteers to help. There's lots of apps out there that can help you with your targeting. Phone calls with your volunteers, that's another big one. I would say those things are key. And then after that, I would say signs, right? Because a lot of this is name recognition. That would be my next place I would go if I had money. Signs next, and mail after that, if it can be afforded, and digital and social media. So those social media, I would even say maybe before mail, depending on how much money you have. Mail is king. It's a very important medium, but it's also very expensive. So that's just me kind of breaking down where I would go if I was kind of in the moderate category of being able to spend some money. All right. Fundraising. All right. So fundraising, what I would say is if you're looking at running for office and you're in the very beginning phases, open up a spreadsheet or I don't know, pick up a notepad and start with every family and friend that you think might donate money to you and write them down and try to get to 100. And that's a big number. Let me tell you, I've had candidates and I've said, sit down and try to come up with 100 people that'll give you money. And people start struggling after 30 or 40, even with some big families. It's harder than you think it is. And I'm not saying you have to get to 100 to be successful, but I'm saying it's going to give you that exercise of truly thinking hard about every neighbor, every contact, every, long lost friend that might find out you're running. And would they give you, $10? Because fundraising gets difficult and you really need to practice knowing where you're going to start off. So that would be my first thing there. If you decide to run for office and you receive any endorsements, call their contribution list. Hi, I'm Bob Smith. I'm running for such and such. I just received the endorsement of Jane Johnson. And I wanted to give you a call because I know you're a supporter of Jane's. And I was hoping that maybe you could also give me a contribution. So that's another place to go to expand out your contribution and fundraising. Make it easy for people to give money to you. That's a huge one. You have to have an online donation. Okay, we're not like that day is past. So make sure you have online contributions available for people to give, and then find unique ideas for fundraising. So, I put on here like $7 for District 7. You're running for District 7. Do a 7 for 7 campaign. You're asking people for $7, and the whole idea there is, it's multiple purposes. It gives you the ability to come back and ask them for more money. So we know that they've supported you one time. There's a good chance they'll give you more. They only gave you $7. What's a little bit more? But it also grows your list of known supporters. And I could talk for days about targeting, but that also gives you the ability to target into your district and find out who those people are. And hopefully, maybe even garner some people that can give you some community or neighborhood support. And then also maybe they're potential volunteers. Maybe they really don't have a lot of money to give, but we know they support you. They've given a little bit of money and they might be willing to be a volunteer for your campaign. So that's another place you can go. And then the final point I want to mention on fundraising is if you don't ask, they won't give. That's really important to know that, because a lot of people, they start their run for office and they say, oh, I'm not, people aren't really giving me money like I thought they would. I've told people that I'm running for office. They know I'm running for office. They're not sending me checks. They're not writing me checks. They're not coming up to me and telling me they'd like to write me a check. That is 100% common, even in some of the most successful races I've worked on. This is a struggle. So I want to tell you, if you do not ask, they will not give, generally speaking. So you have to get comfortable with the ask, and that can be difficult for candidates. I know that. So I wanted to give you a piece of advice that might help you. And that is, know that you are offering something of value. If you come at this and you start worrying, hey, gosh, it's so hard for me to ask people for money. Why? Why is it hard? Because you're offering them something valuable, which is a meaningful candidate on the ballot that wants to truly serve people. And you know that if you win and you get into the seat, that you're going to do good things for your community. So you have something valuable to offer. So why is it hard to ask for some help? Okay, so I think that's just a very important mind shift when it comes to fundraising for you guys. All right, social media. So social media and digital. Real quick, just want to talk about platform changes. Also, if whoever's keeping time, can you tell me how much time I have left? No rush on that, but if you could jump in and let me know how much time I've got.
You actually have, I think we have you until your presentation until 10:30. So you've got 12 more minutes.
Awesome. Okay, good. All right. So social media. Thank you, Els. Social media and digital. Let's talk about platform choices. There's so many now. If I was to, just give a general, a general idea of where I would go, I would say Facebook, number one, potentially Instagram, number two, Twitter, probably number three, although, there is some thing to be said about Twitter and some of the opportunities there, especially depending on your party affiliation and what you want to do with your campaign and how willing you are to stay fresh with the content on Twitter, because you really have to stay fresh with content on Twitter. So that's kind of where I would go on the platform choices. And there's a few different reasons for that. But the main thing I would say is if you are already active on a certain platform, like let's say you don't really use Facebook, but you are killing it on Instagram already, that might be your number one platform that you're going to put a lot out there for, because you already have a following on Instagram and not really on Facebook. And I wouldn't say don't use Facebook. I would just say, use Instagram as the place that you're doing maybe the most ads. So that's number one there. Organic growth, which I think is probably self-explanatory, but that's what the growth that you're not paying for. This is the stuff that we love the most. And there's a lot of things that you can do to help with that organic growth. And those are, having the engaging content, posting at the times where you have people that are most active. You can find that out through the insights tabs on your social media platforms. Then there's running social media and digital ads. And these are great because they're cheap, but you have to make sure you're doing them correctly. So you're going to want to make sure that you're targeting the voters on social media. So, and there's so many different ways you can go. Again, there's so much strategy to this stuff, right? But I would say, generally speaking, I would probably go 40 years old and up. Maybe I'd even go 45 and up on my ads. And I totally realize people can start voting at 18, but when you look, generally speaking, at who's going to come out to vote, they're going to be older. So where am I going to spend my money? It's probably going to be there. Maybe you spend a little bit on the younger age groups, but I would personally go maybe 40 years old up, maybe 35 years or older or up, and then go based on, do they, like, let's say you're Republican, right? You're going to want, 35 and up, male, female, Fox News, that kind of stuff. You're going to want to find and kind of target in as closely as you can. Facebook has made that a little bit harder than it used to be. So you might have to get creative with it. Wall Street Journal, for example, we know a lot of people who read Wall Street Journal are more right leaning. You're going to really want to look for the places where you might be able to find your niche of voter, right? Someone on the Democratic side, you're going to probably look at MSNBC, CNN, stuff like that. Okay. How to handle trolls. Every candidate, just, newsflash, like every single one of you all that runs for office is going to have trolls on your page, 100%. So if you're one of those types of people that don't like people coming after you, you're going to have to just develop that thick skin. You're going to have to be ready for these people that are going to jump on your page and they're going to say really nasty things about you and your mama and your family and everything you've ever done in your whole life. So just be ready for that. And what I generally say is pay very little attention to them. They want to get under your skin. And if they do, they're winning. So don't worry about that. The next thing is, if you're not already an elected official, you can choose to block those people. I mean, I think in our world of consultants, there's been a lot of fluctuation in the way that we feel about blocking. And I would generally say, unless they are truly nonstop, absolutely terrible, I would actually keep them on the page. I would keep them on the page and just respond to them in a way that is calm, cool, collected, message yourself properly, because there's going to be other people that are going to read those responses and they're going to like the fact that you're able to handle yourself with grace. And you're also going to be able to educate other people. You're actually responding to them, not for the troll's sake, you're responding to them for everybody else's sake. And I think that can be important. And I would leave them there, generally speaking, because it also shows that you can handle the heat, and that's important too. The next thing is, and I also want to mention, sorry, I got to back up on one thing on the digital ads. You will have to go through a verification process on Facebook. That includes uploading your ID and that kind of thing. So just a heads up on that. You will have to do that. That's normal. That all happened after the 2016 election stuff. And sometimes they can't verify you. You have to actually go get a notarized form and upload that. It's a very quick process, but I do want to mention you will have to go through that. That's normal if it happens to you. All right, skipping back down now. Timing and frequency. So I mentioned that you have insights on these platforms. You can see when your audience is most active. That's going to be really important. These social media platforms will also give you things like, the percentage of male, female on your page, right? They're going to give you a lot of different information, how long people are watching your videos. On YouTube, similar, and some of the other platforms like Instagram, they're going to tell you how long people are watching your content. If they're dropping off your content after like 1 or 2 seconds, you're going to want to create more engaging content that can keep them there. And definitely you're going to want to brand your content as often as you can. So even if they're on there for a second, hopefully they see your name. All right, let's talk about advertising. So we're talking here about non-digital advertising. Oh, and I'm so sorry, on the digital social media side, let me back up 1 second. The other thing I want to mention is on this digital, I have running social media and digital ads. So digital, I'm speaking specifically about like Hulu ads, Peacock. We're talking if you have the money and you can afford to have a commercial made. I just wanted to mention, because I think it's a good place to go. You can run those ads on YouTube and you can run ads on TV that are not like cable television, but they're for those streaming devices. And we've actually seen a lot of success in running streaming ads. They're not as expensive. And there's some caveats to that, because yes, you could probably buy the Hallmark Channel or something for $25 a spot or less. But generally speaking, you can run digital ads and hit a lot of people, and you can target those. They can use your voter file and target. There's some pretty cool stuff they're doing with digital. So I definitely want to throw that in, that digital has come a long way. And to the point where we've actually run a couple of campaigns and won, like even the Clay County Sheriff's race, Michelle Cook, I worked on that race. Only thing we did was vote by mail chase outside of the county, and did all social media and all digital and some, cable TV, and won that race. So there's a lot to be said about where digital is now. Okay, so non-digital advertising. Now here we're talking about the mail and the signs and the TV and the things that we mentioned earlier. And I wanted to mention that when it comes to non-digital advertising, some of having targeted options is a pro for that in that category. but sometimes you end up with too much loss, and that can be a con. So you're really going to have to decide how that's going to work for you. And an example of that would be like television. So when it comes to television, if you're running in city of Palmetto, right, there's a chance that you're going to have to buy TV that's going to expand far outside of your district. And in that case, may not be a good option for you, right? Similar, maybe city of Sarasota might be a similar thing. Now, some of these stations you can target in down to the zip code level, and that for cable. And so that might be an option, but broadcast, you're gonna, if you're buying out of Tampa or something, you're gonna have a lot of people that are gonna see it, and you're gonna pay for a lot of people that aren't gonna be able to vote for you. So that's something to keep in mind there. Also, it can be expensive. So weigh the return on that investment. So that goes for things like billboards or, even mail. To be honest, I love mail. It's hard to, I don't even know if I could say I'd ever want to have a campaign with absolutely zero mail, but it is an expensive one. So deciding how much you can afford and what is the return on that investment for you is key. And then find creative ways to make the most of your outreach on these mediums. So for example, like in Sarasota and Manatee County, we've used these before too. But for example, we've taken the sign, and it's a little hard because you guys can't see me and I don't have my video working, but you can take your sign and turn it on the diamond. So your 4x4 big signs, instead of being a square, you can actually turn them rotate it and make it a diamond. They really stand out. We use those on the school referendum down in Sarasota. They really stand out in an election cycle. That's something that you're taking, a traditional advertising, medium, and you're going to just do something a little bit unique with it. Maybe in the last, maybe 2 to 4 weeks of a campaign, you go out and you paint all the signposts a bright color to make them see your sign again, brand new, or to catch their eye, brand new. That's something you can do. Maybe don't use red, white, and blue. I mean, red, white, and blue is very common, completely makes sense to me. I understand it, but in a sea of red, white, and blue signs, maybe you're the green sign, right? Maybe you're something a little bit different. So just come up with creative ways to take these mediums, make them your own, and make yourself stand out. I think that can be really important. And I also just want to mention, there's a lot of small advertising space that you can do, right? You can advertise into the trailer parks, for example, in their newsletters and things like that. Don't overlook some of those advertising mediums. They can be effective in some of those areas. Those people are really reading those. So just keep all that stuff in mind. And, it used to be you could buy the wrapper around the newspaper, but now, of course, not many of us get the newspaper delivered to us, right? So everything is changing. And I would say digital ads are the next place to go. How to handle attacks. All right, so this can be a difficult one. Not many races nowadays that I work on that there's not, some pretty nasty attacks happening. And I wanted to mention that there's no one size fits all option on how to handle an attack. There's a lot of different things that you need to think about. And that comes down to that second point, which is weighing the risk versus the reward. How much money do you have to respond? How much time do you have to respond, right? Maybe it's right at the very end of the campaign. Are you going to lose voters yourself in your response? Are you going to gain voters back in your response? There's so many things to think about depending on what the attack is and the timing and the money. So there's not anything, there's just a lot to think about there. But one thing I will say is, generally speaking, this is the way that voters' minds work, right? If you're sending them a lot of positive messaging, hopefully you're winning them over, right? Assuming that you have good messaging, you're winning them over. And then let's say that you yourself decide to go on the attack. This is how this works in the voters' minds. And this has been proven with polling and science and data. You go negative on somebody. okay, so now you've peeled some points off of your opponent. No doubt about it. You have done that if you've done it effectively, but you've also pulled a little bit off of yourself. So you have to think about that as well and where you are in the campaign. And if you do go negative, I would highly recommend that you finish positive. You got to come back around and finish positive after you've gone negative. And then the other thing is, you know, if somebody's going negative on you, yes, they're pulling points off of you. And then when you turn around and go back negative on them, then it just becomes this cat fight and everybody starts going, oh, I don't know. You know, there's a lot of times you end up seeing voter apathy in those situations because they get really down about what's going on. So, and then trust but verify. Sometimes you get information that's not good. So you want to make sure that you're getting good information and think about how much it's helping you to use it. Get back on track as fast as possible. A lot of negative stuff will take you completely off your game, and you need to get back on track on your campaign plan as fast as you can. And the last thing I'll say about this is do not read every negative comment online because they will come after you and it's just going to upset you. So you need to stay focused on your campaign and what you've got going on. And then this is the last thing because I think I'm running over on time. So I'll be really quick with this one. Campaign setup and structure. You know, obviously you have the candidate. You can have your treasurer. You can be your own treasurer. I know that so we went over that, so I won't spend a lot of time there. Paid roles. So, and paid roles, we're talking about people like myself, you know, consultants, general consultants. Some people will pay for a volunteer coordinator, a pollster, as we talked about earlier, a social media manager, or a grassroots campaign manager. Those are some of the, you know, the main ones. And every campaign is different. So we'd have to discuss that, whether that's, you know, which of those is that works for you and which ones don't. And the other thing I would say is if you don't have a paid volunteer coordinator, which honestly, in most campaigns, I don't recommend to have, I would say try to find a lead volunteer. Somebody kind of leads up your volunteers, takes a little bit of that weight off your shoulder. And then also find volunteers, find the best job for those volunteers. For example, I had a volunteer one time who, you know, couldn't do a lot. They had some learning disabilities and such, but they really wanted to help a candidate. So we put them on patrol of signs and we said, hey, please go around and check our signs. If you see any down, if you see any damage, let us know. And they did a great job at that. So you can find volunteers in every type of person in every type of way and make sure you use them to the best of your ability. And that's pretty much it. I put my contact information up here. If anybody did want to talk to me, I do 1 hour consultations for free. So I'm willing to talk with you, and that's pretty much it.
Well, thank you. That was wonderful. And let's move to Colleen. I know you have questions.
We have quite a few questions. There was so much information there. So I'm going to start with the most recent question because it's in response to what you were just talking about.
Okay.
Charlie Kennedy asks, we have local electeds now who are blocking users on their elected official social media accounts. We always hear this is not allowed, but the blocking continues. Is there a legal requirement to not block people and it's not being enforced?
Charlie, fantastic question. This has actually happened to me when I lived in Manatee County from a local official who's still there. And you know, there's been a lot of confusion on that, but the short answer is it is true that you cannot block people on your social media. That is now been held up in court multiple times. And, you know, that's kind of the simple and direct place of where we are right now. They cannot be, you know, doing that. And if they are, I would say send a letter, you know, if possible. And I don't know if it's possible that, you know, maybe there's a templated letter or something out there, but I would find it and send it and start requiring them to you know, unblock you guys because they cannot be doing that. And the other option, of course, is to have an attorney involved, and that can be expensive, right? When all you're trying to do is see these social media posts. But yeah, the short answer is no, they are not allowed to do that.
And just one additional question, Andre. Generally, what does it cost to have a consultant like you support a campaign?
Oh, yeah, that can be a tough one. It depends on, it honestly depends on the level of need on the campaign and you know, the size of the district and a lot of different things, but I would say, and there's some consultants that work for less. Man, that's a tough question. There's some consultants that might help you out for, you know, $500 to $1,000 a month. And then there's a lot of consultants like myself where I, generally speaking, I won't go quite that low unless I feel very determined on what's going on with your race and your situation. And maybe it's a very small district or something like that. So you can easily spend, there's some, you know, people out there that are doing, you know, $3,000 to $5,000 a month for consulting fees. That's definitely not unheard of.
So this is related generally to the cost of campaigning. This comes from Rita Hummel. Rita, I know you have several questions. I'll start with this one. Are there ways for a potential candidate to run for office if they aren't wealthy? I understand to even qualify to run, you have that $5,000 initial fee that you have to pay personally. So that's the question.
And sorry, you kind of, on my side, you cut out for just a quick second. Can you repeat the beginning of that?
Of course. Are there ways for a potential candidate to run for office even if they aren't wealthy?
Sure, absolutely. You know, get the petition signed, right, so that you don't have to pay that filing fee, and run a strong grassroots campaign. And that is going to take people, though. So yes, you can absolutely do it without a lot of money. I will also say, though, the success rates on those aren't as high. That's just the reality of the situation. But can it be done? Absolutely. But you're gonna need a team.
Okay. And also from Rita, do out-of-town donations cause a skew in votes expected?
I wish I could say yes, but I have to say no. No. As long as donations are legal, generally speaking, they're not going to affect the final outcome of the vote at all.
Okay. And Bob Fine asks, is there, what's the interaction between the candidate and local political party?
And when you say interaction, I'm assuming that you mean like support from the political party?
I would think so. We had another question asking that specifically. And Bob, if that's not what you want, you could just clarify for me.
Okay. I can answer that part, though. Like from the political party side, you know, a lot of times they will hand out their own literature that they will then go and door knock with, or, you know, take to events, or, you know, things like that. Or when people call in, they'll let people know who the Democrat or Republican are on the ballot, and they'll put those people on their literature. In the primaries, I, you know, to my knowledge, I haven't seen one yet that will pick one specific candidate because they lose that state funding. So they'll put you on their literature. They'll help you get out there. A lot of times they'll even host phone banking and things like that for candidates, door knocking. Yeah, so you get quite a bit of support from the parties in many cases. I mean, at least they do what they can, and they can also donate to the campaign or do advertising donations and things like that.
And do you find Manatee or Sarasota County different than other areas of Florida in terms of campaigning, the strategies that are used?
Yes, I would say that what we're seeing so much. I'm not saying there's no special interest money in other places, but we're seeing, you know, just a few individuals with so much money, and, you know, they're using tactics that it's just kind of set up and done in a way that is sort of an anomaly from what I'm seeing in other areas of the state. And so, yes, they are different.
Okay. And then some nuts and bolts from Rita again. Are there any existing classes for voter targeting?
Ooh, good question. Not to my knowledge. And if you're talking about how to like use Excel and such, that, you know, those types of classes you can get online, and that's probably all you need. I don't know of any specific voter targeting classes, but you could, if you know Excel and you learn a bit about Excel, that would be my place to go.
Okay. And then another question was related to social media. Does a candidate need separate social media accounts separate from their personal accounts?
Yes, I would absolutely start a separate political candidate, you know, like a business account is essentially what it is, like on Facebook. So it's not a personal account where you can have, you don't have friends, you have followers. I would
Mhm.
absolutely do that and keep it separate from your personal.
Okay. And then how are these special interests getting more than, $1,000 to a campaign?
Because they're using political committees. So they don't have limitations on the political committee side. So you're going to see these, and they're going to name them fantastic things, right? They're going to say like Citizens for a Brighter Manatee or whatever when they come into your mailbox, and you're going to have no idea who's actually funding those. And I guarantee you it's 2 or 3 people tops that are putting lots and lots of money in, and they're pretending like it's a bunch of citizens, but it's not. And so that's how they're doing it, though, is all through political committee.
So how would you say campaigning has changed over the last few years?
Just from my experience, and some of these are depending on the location, but I would say, things going digital is so much more common. That's been a major change. Using a lot more apps, even for door knocking and phone calling and such, has changed. And gotten much more, and text messaging. I would say text messaging is another big one that's changed. It's become a big part of campaigns. And then I would say, honestly, the general nastiness and the nationalization of issues at the local level, acting like national issues actually really are at play in local elections has become a lot more common and successful. They wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't successful. So I think those are the biggest changes in my opinion.
Well, Andre, thank you so much. I don't have any other questions. I don't know, Alice, if you have any other question for Andre. Thank you so much for all the information.
I do have one additional question. Are you aware of any municipality or county in the state of Florida that puts some kind of ethics or financial or PAC constraints on elections at all?
Yeah, I mean, actually, Sarasota had a $200 limit. There are, municipalities that have put constraints on elections. I will say it doesn't necessarily make that a more successful model, though, because you still got, now you've got a person that doesn't have a lot of money who's constrained to $200 donations, and they don't have a lot of contacts and they're constrained to $200 donations. And then you've got other people that have contacts with people that have 11 businesses, and those 11 businesses are all going to write $200 checks. Right. So you're going to continue to see the same problem, even with some of those constraints put into place. But I would say if I could make one change, and I'm nobody, right? I'm not important in this way, but if I could make one change, I would say it would be important to have, if we could have like let's say you file a violation against an opponent in a race, that's not going to be heard by anybody at the state for probably a year, maybe a year and a half. And consultants and some candidates are finding that out, and they're saying, hey, screw it. We're going to go and we're going to push the line and we're going to do stuff. And it may be legal. It may not be right, but they're not going to get on us about it for a year, year and a half. We'll pay a fine at that point. We're going to move on with our life, and you'll be in the seat at that point. So who cares? So if I could say one thing, it would be nice to have some sort of body in place that looks, on an unbiased way. And I know that can be challenging, but it looks unbiasedly at the laws and at least gives some sort of, opinion, even if it's just like an initial opinion, and before it's able to go the very slow bureaucratic route that takes a year and a half during the campaign. And that may or may not make a big difference in the elections, but it would be nice to at least have an initial body saying our initial finding is this is probably a violation during a campaign cycle.
Well, thank you. It's been really great. And you can stop the screen share now.
Okay. You got it.
It's now time for our office holder panel. We are very honored and pleased to have a panel of proven office winners from a variety of offices. Our panelists today are Betsy Benac, former Manatee County Commissioner, Judy Tisworth, Mayor of Holmes Beach, Marianne Barneby, Bradenton City Council member, and Shirley, former Manatee County School Board member. Commissioner Benac is a Manatee County resident who served 2 terms as an at-large county commissioner in District 6. First elected in 2012 and then re-elected in 2016. Her county experience began as an assistant planner for Manatee County Planning in 1983 and continued until 1994 when she served as assistant planning director. In 1994, she was hired as the planning manager for engineering, surveying, and planning in the planning firm Wilson Miller, located in the newly opened Lakewood Ranch Office Park. After 18 years with the firm and rising to the position of principal and vice president with a company known as Stantec, Betsy decided to take a position with Benderson Development. Wanting to continue to serve her community, Betsy answered the call to seek office as county commissioner, challenging a 20-year incumbent. During her tenure, she was elected chair of the commission 3 times, served continuously on the Sarasota-Manatee Metropolitan Planning Organization and the Tampa Bay Area Transit Authority, as well as other assignments. Betsy decided not to seek re-election in 2020 and is enjoying volunteering and family time, including 2 adorable grandchildren, 2 grandchildren, and time with husband Bob of 40 years, and staying aware of what's happening in Manatee County. Mayor Titsworth attended the University of Alaska and Manatee Community College, majoring in business. She has spent her last 30+ years in the construction and development interest. I seem to have dropped a portion of her somehow in here. It did not get. Oh, do you have the bio?
I do. Judy Titsworth was elected as city commissioner in November 2012 for a 2-year term and elected mayor in November 2018. She ran unopposed in both 2020 and 2022. While serving as commissioner, Mayor Titsworth served as the roads, bridges, canals, and erosion liaison, buildings and grounds, and the code enforcement liaison for the city. She also served as alternate for the Manatee County Emergency Operations Center. Mayor Titsworth attended the University of Alaska and Manatee Community College, majoring in business. She has spent the last 30+ years in the construction and development industry. Her community involvement includes serving as a wildlife rehabilitator for over 30 years, also enjoying the outdoors, fishing, scuba diving, boating, and she's also an artist. Mayor Titsworth and her husband, Steve, have 3 children and 7 grandchildren.
When I copied and pasted it into the script, somehow part of it didn't get in there. So, and then we have Marianne Barneby. Prior to her service on the Bradenton Council, Marianne Barneby was employed by both the Appalachian Bend and the Gulf Coast Girl Scouts Council as field executive. Gulf Coast Builders Exchange as membership director and event coordinator, and Blake Hospital as childbirth educator and infant parent program instructor. Marianne served on Bradenton Council from 1998 to 2014. During that time, she served on the Sarasota Manatee Metropolitan Planning Organization, the Sun Coast Partnership to End Homelessness, and the Sarasota Bay Estuary Policy Board, the Manatee County Library Board of Trustees, and the 4-H Foundation Board. In 2020, she ran for Ward 2 council seat and won handily. Marianne is also a founding member and very active in the Faith Methodist Church, a former member of the building committee for the Art Center of Manatee, and board member and grant committee chair for the Service Club of Manatee County. There are a number of other awards and designations here, so I'm going to go quickly to Marianne and her husband are the proud parents of 2 boys, 2 sons, and also raise a niece. Charlie Kennedy earned a BA from the University of Pittsburgh in 1994 and a master's in education from Duquesne University in 2003. Kennedy moved to Bradenton in 2004, where he began his teaching career. Kennedy has been a high school teacher in U.S. history and other subjects at Youth Build Public Charter School in Washington, D.C., the Pendleton School at IMG Academies, and Manatee High School. Most recently, Kennedy served as an elected member of the school board of Manatee County from 2014 to 2022. He is currently the Community Partnership Director at Doherty Elementary School in Bradenton. I'm going to pose written questions from questions written in by our league members, and then we will go to questions that are going to be submitted in chat. So if you have questions for our panel members, please indicate whether, please put it in chat. All the candidates, we're going to rotate it through which one answers first. All the candidates, I'm not showing what the candidates pinned. Are they all 5 pinned? Okay. All the candidates will have 1 minute to answer the question, and then I will hold up this to show that the time has elapsed, and they'll finish their thought, and we'll move to the next panelist. So there's not a lot of time, but I'm sure that they, will be a little lenient on the 1 minute. So, all right, we are going to start with Betsy. And how did you pick your support team? And did you use a professional consultant? But let's start with just how did you pick your support team?
Well, when I first decided to run in 2012, I was working for Benderson Development. I had a lot of contacts in the development world. So I reached out to Randy Benderson. He was the first person I told that I was going to run for office. And he said, "You'll be great." And that was all he said. And then I turned to the people in the building industry that I knew and said, this is happening. I've been talked into it. Who do I use? What do I do? So I was pretty well directed by people when I ran my first time around that knew how to get people elected. I was very fortunate that way because I had those contacts and I listened to that advice. I did. I went with the consultant that they told me to use. I had the assistance of people at Pat Neal's office and raising funds. I was pretty well directed when I first decided to run, and that was because of my my background. So I was very fortunate in that way. And I just want to say to people, don't be overwhelmed by this. This is great information.
Thank you, Betsy. So now we move on to Mayor Titsworth.
I actually did not want to run for office. I was pretty much begged and pleaded to, probably because of my background as well as Betsy's, and because being born and raised in the city of Holmes Beach, I had a lot of history. The team actually picked me. They were successful in elections before. They did all my door knocking. They passed out flyers. They worked so hard to get me in, along with some other of the commissioners. That was when I was running for commission. It's completely different than county races. County races is a long, drawn out, hard effort, a lot harder than Holmes Beach. But I really appreciated all the help that I did get from my team.
Thank you. And on to Councilwoman Marianne.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for putting this opportunity together. Just so you know, my background and my college education is in not-for-profit agency administration, and that's something that I think has been very helpful to me working as an elected official. When I first ran, there was a lot of turmoil in the city of Bradenton in 1996, 1997. It was a mess. And my team came out of groups that were getting together to talk about the problem that we had, which was why Mayor Evers was going to take over our beautiful waterfront and put a city building there. And he wanted to put the police, the fire, and City Hall all on that piece of property. And we had a community meeting, 1,000 people showed up. We didn't have 1,000 people in this community protest against Vietnam or protest during the civil rights issues. But we had 1,000 people show up saying, we understand you need new facilities, just don't build it there. So my team kind of came out of that group, and I did use a local consultant at that time because I needed help with marketing and some of those things. Being a mom with 2 small children didn't leave me a great deal of time. This year, I had been appointed to my seat in 2020, but I had to run for the seat this year. Everyone I'd used in the past, everyone that I'd worked with, all of my vendors were dead. I reached out to someone that I had met 20 years ago as a consultant and asked him if he would recommend someone for me. And he said, I'm taking you. So that's how I ended up with my consultant this time.
Okay, thank you. And on to Charlie Kennedy, Chair Charlie Kennedy, School Board Chair.
That's former school board chair. I'm the chair of nothing these days, except the one that's sitting on. No, I'll be really quick so we can get through more questions. I did not hire any consultants. I ran a pretty much grassroots campaign. In 2014, there was 3 school board races. In the 2 other ones besides mine, there was quite a bit of money raised. In my race, I only raised about $7,000 or $8,000. In 2018, when I ran again, I raised even less. Partially because I was like, kind of like Mayor Titsworth said, I wasn't really sure I wanted to run again, but I was just kind of in a position, well, the only people who have stepped up are, I don't want to see on the school board, so I got to run again. You know, I just want to let people know that you can, especially if you're in a district only race, whether it's commission or school board, and all school board races are district only, they're no longer countywide. You don't need a fancy operation around you. You can do a lot of work yourself and with a couple of friends and your campaign treasurer. So don't be, you know, for prospective candidates, don't be scared off by the amount of work, because it, you know, it's work, but it's not a daunting task to just be yourself and run a grassroots campaign.
Thank you. The next question is, how did you handle fundraising in your campaign? And we will start with, I'm just going to use first names. Betsy.
Okay.
Oh, wait
yeah.
a minute. I'm sorry. That I've got to rotate here. Mayor Titsworth.
Again, island elections are very different than the county. We didn't have to raise very much money. So as soon as we qualified, the people just started sending in checks. I had some meet and greets, met with some associations, but the fundraising part was minimal for a small city election.
Thank you. And Betsy?
Yeah, it was kind of a lot what Andre said. You start a list of people you know that will support you. You start asking people, you know, it's not easy to ask people for money. I mean, I'd never done it before. I'd not been in a fundraising position before. So yeah, you have to, it helps to work with people. I think a lot of people know that Pat Neal has people that help him raise money on his staff, and they worked very closely with me to help to raise funds. And I think that's great that, and you have organizations that will help you to raise funds, but you really have to, you know, you have to put on your best face and get your best elevator speech and go out and ask for those funds. You got to do it. Otherwise you're going to be at a disadvantage. So that's what I like to say.
Okay, Charlie.
Thank you. Same thing. I just like Andre said, and Betsy mentioned, I started with the list of family and friends, and I started with them to do some small number fundraising. I then dumped all of my email contacts into MailChimp and sent out an email to anybody I guess emailed in the previous 15 years. That didn't bear too much fruit, but and I didn't do I like Betsy said, the last thing in the world I want to do is ask people for money, but you really have to kind of force yourself to make some kind of ask. I didn't do a lot of events or go after big name donors because I was in a pretty low key, low attention school board race. But you do get better at it. Like once you start asking a little bit, it does get easier, and you find out sometimes you get very pleasantly surprised where somebody you just planned to maybe ask for $50 or $100, they'll write you a $200 or $500 check. So it's really hard to do, but it's something you have to, especially if you're running in a larger county race. I mean, these races are over $100,000 to $150,000 now. That's a number I'm just not. I don't have the background or capability to raise that much money unless called in some big wigs. But again, just another thing. Don't let I don't want to ask for money. Don't let that keep you from running because you do get better at it.
Thank you. And Marianne.
Thank you. That's why I mentioned my background in not-for-profit agency administration. I worked at the local girls club starting at 15, and we would have to go out and ask for donations of paint and other craft supplies and things like that. So from the time I was 15, I got accustomed to asking people for various and sundry things. The first time I ran, I raised, I'm thinking it's around $22,000. And in 1998, that shocked a lot of people. But I felt that I was the best candidate at that time. As a native of Bradenton, I wanted to see change in Bradenton, and I just believed I was going to do it. So I started going out and asking people for money. This time around, I think I raised about $50,000 from the community, and I put in additional money myself personally because I wanted to make sure that my message got out. And again, it's like a muscle. The more you use a muscle, the easier the exercise gets. Asking for money is not the easiest thing in the world, but you also have to decide that money is a tool. That's all it is. A hammer can build a house, or a hammer can bust somebody in the head. It's just a tool. Money is just a tool. If you believe in what you want to do and you want to have an impact in your community, start from that point. And then practice your speech on your family and friends.
Thank you. Okay. How did how can your party be, or how has your party been an assistance or not an assistance to you as a candidate? And we're going to start with you, Marianne.
Well, I'm kind of unusual in that the city charter states that city elected officials are nonpartisan. So I don't necessarily have to curry favor with either party. And I believe that the 57,000 residents of Bradenton are my bosses. I don't necessarily answer to a state party or a national party. I just try to do what I believe is in the best interest of the most people, trying to do the most good for the most people. So I'll let the other individuals answer because they probably have had to deal with party politics.
Okay, and we will now go to Charlie.
This question doesn't apply to me because I ran twice as an NPA.
Okay. Betsy, I bet it applies to you.
Well, of course, it's no secret. I ran as a Republican both time, and I don't know if it was stated, and I want to make sure people know. In order to run as a party, you have to be a member of that party for at least a year before you can run. You cannot come into Manatee County at the last minute, as my last opponent did, and say, "Hey, I'm going to run as a Republican." No, you have to have been a registered Republican or Democrat for at least a year before you can run as under that party name. And yes, it's important if you're running as a Republican or a Democrat, I assume, again, I ran as a Republican, that you do meet with your party. I was involved. I was on the Republican Executive Committee. It was what you were basically expected to do. You learn all of that. I learned a lot. I, quite frankly, was not involved before I ran with the Republican Executive Committee, but I became involved, got to know a lot of people. It's great how many people you really do meet when you're in for office, but it's important. And they do provide funding. Currently, they do not vote in a primary if you're running against a Republican, because they don't pick one or the other. That may change. I have not been involved in the Republican Executive Committee since leaving office, but that could change. Things are changing a lot at that level. I think it's important for, if you're running, you really should understand. If you're running for not as an NPA, you're running in a certain party, you need to understand what the party expects of you.
Thank you. All right.
Did Judy answer that?
No, I haven't answered.
Oh,
Again,
you're right. It's not highlighted here. Judy.
We're a nonpartisan election as well. I was in a party when I was a commission, but just because I was in a party, never decided who I voted for in any election. So when I became mayor, I decided to do nonpartisan. But yes, I just vote for community issues, and community issues are nonpartisan issues. And so, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Similar to Marianne and similar to Shirley.
So this will start with Charlie. Looking at the last campaign you did, was there anything you missed in the process that you would recommend that a candidate take into consideration?
Oh, wow. I would say it's not something I didn't do. It's something that I did do, I would do differently. And Andre touched on this about social media and dealing with trolls, is that I would sometimes get a little too fixated on trying to answer the haters. And what I would do differently is actually just address people with legitimate questions. They may disagree with me or come at me with some pushback, but I spent too much time trying to win over people that I was never going to win over. So that's off the top of my head. That's the one thing I would do differently.
Okay, thank you. And Marianne?
That's a really good question. I think it kind of goes back to knowing who you are and knowing what your personal values are, because that's going to shape your campaign. And if someone, whether it be a vendor, a consultant, or someone comes up with something that they want you to do and you're not comfortable doing it, my advice is don't do it. Because if you're not comfortable doing something, it's going to show, it's going to come out. My first campaign, I felt like I really needed to hit as many doors personally as I could. And we went out on a Sunday afternoon one time, and Sunday afternoons are very sacred at my house. And I wasn't comfortable doing it, and I didn't do it again. Going out on a Sunday when I had small children at home just did not work for me. So I guess my advice is, if someone tries to talk you into doing something and deep down in your gut, it doesn't align with who you are or how you believe, don't do it.
Thank you. And Mayor Tisworth?
I think my hardest election I've ever been in was my very first one, because it got pretty negative with the opponents. They were putting out flyers and signs against me, and being that was my very first time getting in politics. If I consider myself the absolute not a politician, I'm in here just because I want to do things right for the city. But you have to have really thick skin. You got to be able to let things bounce off. And the longer I've been in the spotlight, the easier it's become. So not too many things get inside anymore. But when you're new out there, just don't let it get inside.
And Betsy? what's surprised you in the last campaign, or you would like to relate to the people considering?
Sure. So the first time you're introducing yourself, everyone, people don't really know you, right? They don't know you. I ran countywide. People didn't know who I was. Very different race the second time around because you're actually running on your record when you're running for re-election. And so where you might have a little bit more of a confidence level, maybe where you've made, some issues and maybe you do things differently. It was a very weird race for me because the guy that ran against me didn't even live here, and he qualified the day of, and he used his father's name because his father had lived here for a long time. It was really a weird race. So I had a hard time trying to, I just wanted folks to know what I had accomplished, what I wanted to do to try to focus on that. And there was so much distraction, I guess. Again, like Marianne says, just focus on what you want to work with the community, what you think still needs to be done, and try to focus on that and not so much the distractions. But let's face it, that's how people get elected now. There is a lot of distractions, a lot of noise, and that's how it's going to be, I think, in the near future. People want to talk about federal issues, things that don't matter in Manatee County. Trying to focus and get people to talk about what is important in Manatee County. I still think that's what we need to do what you need to do if you're running for election.
Thank you. The next 4 questions are going to come from chat, and I remind everybody to put your questions to Cheryl Kaplan. So Cheryl, what question do we have? And this is going to start with Betsy. Hello, Cheryl. Okay, I'll start with the first one. It is from Keith Green. It's a little bit like the last one. What advice would you give to a new candidate running for office in this very negative political climate? And let's start with Betsy.
Okay. Yeah, I do think you need to have a really good understanding of what's going on in the community, what needs to be done, what some of the issues are and Keith, you and I talked about this a little bit and it sounds like you're doing a good job of listening to people, what it is that concerns them, and try to stay away from the negative, try to focus back into what's important at the local level. I think that's what the advice I would give people. Sure, you want to know things about your opponent, where they might go, what some of the issues they think are important. But if you talk about things that are and you listen and you learn what's important to your constituents, that's what I think you want to address. And that's how I think you can be successful, even in this very negative situation we're in.
Okay. And Judy?
Betsy, you said it best. I'm not going to repeat what you said. Just listen to your constituents, and you're going to be okay.
Okay, thank you. On to Marianne.
I would say number 1, make sure you know what the hot button issues are and have a good soundbite answer for those issues. Number 2, I think it's incredibly important if you're running for office that you spend time and learn about property rights in the state of Florida, because people are going to talk to you about, we don't want all these people here. How do we stop it? This sort of thing. Nobody pays attention out in, the world that we currently are in to the fact that property rights are in the state constitution, and you can't tell somebody that they cannot reasonably develop their property. People are coming, whether we like it or not. I mean, my family came down here in the late 1800s. Do you think I've seen a lot of change in my 65 years? Yes, I have. But you've got to understand property rights. You've got to understand the finances of the group that you're going to be getting into, whether it be city or county. Understand the funding sources, understanding how ad valorem tax works, understand how enterprise fund works. You've got to have that kind of basic information because it's incredibly important. And then, as Betsy said before, I think the most important thing that I do every single day is listen. and listen with the intent to learn, not the intent to respond.
Okay, and Charlie?
Yeah, I'll be quick because I don't have much to add because the answers before have been great. As a first-time candidate, I think it's good to do two things. Number one, just be yourself. That's the most successful path you can take. Don't try to be somebody you're not, or play a character, or come up with policy positions because you think that's what people want to hear. Just express yourself, the things you believe in, and be yourself. Is the best advice I can give somebody. And the other piece is to not underestimate voters. Voters are a lot smarter than we generally give them credit for. I know in Manatee County over the past 2 election cycles, it doesn't feel that way because some races have not gone the way that we hoped. But generally speaking, voters are paying attention. I'll just share a quick example. I've been to the Tea Party, whatever they're called now, multiple times, and I was in office long enough that a lot of people in the Tea Party, I was a villain to them. But every time I would go there, people would approach me afterwards and be like, "Hey, I really liked your answer on this question," or like, "You're not at all what people were telling me you were like." So it's really important to if you get invited to something, go to it no matter what the political leaning of the organization is, and be yourself and talk up to people. Don't talk down to people.
Thank you. Cheryl, the next question will go to Judy. What do you have next?
All right. I have several questions here, and I've been trying to send them over to you since there is struggle. Okay. All right. This is from Aaron Curlin. Voter turnout among people 18 to 30 was less than 30% in the last election. How do we get more young people interested in voting?
And that would be to Judy.
I'm surprised at the number that it's lower, because I do feel that the younger people are getting more involved, and maybe it's just because I'm a mayor and I've got young adults and they all seem fired up, and maybe it's just because I'm in politics. But I have hope that the young people are going to take more of an initiative, especially with the decisions the state's made in the last year.
Okay, thank you. And Marianne.
That's a really good question. And as the mother of a 33 and a 30-year-old, and I think part of it is the issues that seem to get a lot of traction may not be the most important issues for younger voters. And they may not be able to have the vision to see how action that we take now can affect them in 20, 30, 40 years. The other thing I think is that those of us of a certain age remember in the 70s when the voting age was changed to 18, primarily because of the Vietnam War. You had a lot more youth involved, a lot more activism going on in that age group. It's very funny, and I jokingly have said numerous times, if mommy's an elected official and daddy is a government attorney, the kids are going to have great stories to tell the therapist. But the thing is that they would get involved in conversations with their friends, and their friends would be like, how do you know these things? And they're like, well, how do you not know these things? Perhaps organizations such as the League of Women Voters could make it a priority to, and they may do it already, but what you're telling me by the question is you think that the youth, the younger voters are not engaged. So how do we get the younger voters engaged? I guess that's my question. And I'm thinking that there was a story in the paper recently that the Republican Party did not have the engagement that or the results from the engagement that they did, didn't turn out. I think all groups need to be more inclusive. They need to reach out. This is not the time to circle the wagons. And that's my answer.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And this would be a very appropriate question for you, Charlie. You're next.
I'm sorry, what was the question again? Sorry, I've been dealing with my neurotic cat over here.
You're a voter turnout among people 18 to 30 was less
Got
than
it. Sorry. Yeah. You know, we have this idealistic view of like, we got to get young kids out to vote. And on the national stage, thank God they did come out to vote. Well, sorry. No, generally speaking, it's a great thing that young people came out to vote nationally. And I think personally, I think that was driven by some Supreme Court decisions and just kind of the heightening of the culture war stuff. And that got young people out. But generally speaking, people are voters or they are not. And you can do a lot of civics education. But, you know, up until this last election cycle, we didn't really see a blip in youth voting. Every single time, like they just don't show up. So my feeling has always been, if you have limited resources, it's best to drive turnout among registered voters, because in Manatee County, the last cycle, look how many people just didn't come out. And so they're registered, but they didn't come out to vote. And so I'm kind of veering away from the actual question, but my advice to candidates would be, is spend your time and resources on getting out registered voters. Don't try to go through a lot of voter registration drives, because, you know, typically you do those drives and then many of those people that sign up don't actually come out. So, you know, I think as Marianne mentioned, you know, I think that was valid. And, you know, as this culture war and these social issues pick up, you know, hopefully we'll continue to see young people come out. But my focus for myself, especially going into the future, when and if I run in 24, although I think I am, will be to focus on people who are already registered regardless of age.
Okay, thank you. And Betsy.
Yeah, I think that, you know, first we have to try to avoid helplessness, you know, that people think they can't have any effect on what's going on in their community. That isn't just for young people, but I do think that's a problem. That, you know, I have a daughter who is somewhat political, who's 33, and she wanted to run for office in Sarasota. And then she saw how horrible it was. And she said, I could never do that. I could never do that to my family. And I'm like, oh, geez, you know, you do have to have a tough skin, but to get people interested, you got to talk about the issues that are of concern to them. Affordable housing, big issue for young people in our community. Traffic, you know, being stuck in traffic when gas is, you know, $4 a gallon, you know, being stuck in traffic's a huge issue for young people. Open space, you know, they want open space. We were talking about how much we love open space. And when we have family comes from out of town, they love our open space, but the young people love open space. Clean water. You know, we got to talk about the issues that do matter to young people, and tell them, you know, you can have a change, and show some of the effect that they might have had at the federal level. You know, we just have to try to get them involved and to say, look, yes, it can be really ugly. Yes, you know how social media works. You're so good at it, young people, compared to, you know, people like Marianne and I, us old geezers that have been around for a long time. Since we're the exact same age, I can say that to you. So I think that's what we want to do, is try to get them fired up. You know, I was at Oscura last weekend, and it was just so much fun to see so many young people downtown Bradenton really enjoying it. There's so much going on in downtown Bradenton. I'll give them a shout out. Getting so many young people there, get them engaged, get them to come in, get them to come to a League of Women Voters event. I'm not sure. I think they are concerned about what's going on in their community.
Yeah. Okay. In defense, we're going to keep this topic about running for office, and I'm sure we'll have something else on young people and what we do and getting people engaged. But it is true that we work on that, and it is true also what Charlie said, is that you can register them, but getting them to vote is another issue, and that's what we've done a lot of focusing on. So,
another-
Cheryl, one more question.
Yeah.
Or two more, one more.
Actually, I have a statement, but I also, no, actually I have two questions. And this is from Karen Curlin again. Do you recommend serving on an advisory board for county commission to gain experience?
Okay, and let's broaden that, and it starts with Marianne to say, because some of you, three of you are not on the county commission. So basically, some board, commission, volunteer group that relates to the type of work you do. So Marianne.
Yes, I would recommend that because you get to know the issues. We are always trying to find individuals that want to serve on volunteer boards. It's not the easiest thing in the world. We have boards such as the Plating Commission, the Tree Board. I'm trying to think of some of the others with the city that I'm blanking on right now. But you get involved, you get to see perhaps a different part of the community that you had not been involved in before. And I think that it's very important to do that. It gives you a wider view of what's going on. And I think that's very helpful.
Thank you. Next is Charlie.
To Marianne's point earlier, it's a great way to get to know the issues. It's a great way to get to know the current members of the board to which you would like to be elected. And by the way, the school board, just to get a plug in for our committees, the school board does have 2 citizen volunteer committees. So if anybody down the road is thinking about school board, there's a financial oversight committee, which oversees the 1 mil referendum funds. And then there's an audit committee, which has been in existence since about 2013. That was a little more highly qualified. You have to be a CPA or have education finance background. But the school board, the county has many, the city of Bradenton has many. The school board has 2 possibilities, and it is a great way to get your foot in the door and start building relationships and getting to know issues.
Great, thank you. Betsy.
Yeah, I absolutely agree that you should, if you have an opportunity and you can bring something to one of the committees. It doesn't have to be planning commission. The planning commission, you certainly can learn about, the land use issues and how projects actually do go through the process and how that works and the laws. But maybe infrastructure sales tax right now, they're looking for an oversight committee, and the county right now is looking for people to volunteer and to have a understanding of how the finances work in the county and what some of the projects are. Boy, you'll have a step up. When you start talking about things, knowledge is power, right? So if you can get involved in some of the committees, whether it be at the city level, the school board level, the county level, I think that's really a great idea.
And Judy.
Yes, at least in the very least for your resume. But if you can't attend, I would become a part of a board. I would say definitely attend as many meetings as you can. I mean, at least a year in advance. They're all open meetings. Get educated and understand what's important to the community.
Thank you.
And Alice, if I just to add, it might not necessarily mean that you get involved in something government related. Rotary clubs, Kiwanis clubs, Braden Women's Club, the Service Club of Manatee County, those will give you information about a lot of different social issues, and community involvement is always important for an elected official. Thank you.
And nonprofits. I'll even add that.
And League of Women Voters.
And League of Women Voters.
Yeah.
Right on our homepage, you can click on join.
There's one more
question. Yeah.
And Jane Christensen asks, is it also important to develop relationships with other commissioners and legislators?
Oh, I'm sorry. That starts with Charlie.
Yeah, obviously you want to have a great relationship, or as best as you can, with your fellow commission or whatever agency or board you're serving on. No matter what your political affiliation or ideology, you obviously want to spend a lot of your time building and improving those relationships. I have a little bit, after 8 years on the school board, I have a little bit of a cynical view of relationships with legislators. Although Will Robinson is a good personal friend. And Will and I are, on opposite sides of a lot of issues, but we always respect each other. But from the school board perspective, every year we would make asks of the legislative delegation, and they would go absolutely nowhere because the state's education agenda is being driven from the governor's office and the leadership really it's being driven by the governor's office and the culture war undermining of public schools. So school boards across the state of Florida, they can make all the asks they want, but I personally don't think anybody's listening because they've got their own agenda they're carrying out from Tallahassee. So I think those intrapersonal board relationships are incredibly important. The legislators, from the school board perspective, I don't think anybody's really listening, honestly.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Betsy?
Yeah, certainly with legislators, it's very important, I think, to have a good relationship. They're holding a lot of purse strings at the state level, and you certainly want to understand the things that, are important to them and how you can work together with them. I think if you represent locally, that you want to be able to have a good relationship with your state legislature, for sure. As far as coworkers, other people that are on the board with you, I always viewed that as a job, and like any job, I would be very collegial with my fellow commissioners. I think it's important to have respect and understanding. I don't think necessarily, and I think we've had had some really weird past few years about some of the relationships. You cannot be part of a gang and come up with a plan together that you're going to implement. That's against the Sunshine Law. That is against the Sunshine Law. So yes, you want to be collegial, you want to understand what your boundaries are. You do not make deals with fellow commissioners. I don't know if that was a question that got asked, but that I wanted.
Pretty close. Pretty close. Thank you.
I think that's good. Now, Judy, I'm going to expand this a little bit from you, because from your standpoint, it's not only the state legislators, but you've got county that you work with too. So we'll give that same question to you.
Okay. City commissions, yes, respect is very important. You're in a public meeting. I think it's important that we're collegial to each other and show a lot of respect for each other at all times. And when you're at city commission meetings, know that you're on Zoom. Anyone can be there. When you're discussing issues at the county, don't single people out, certain commissioners out. Don't try to call names. Don't make it personal. You're talking issues, and you're always talking issues because that's what matters to the people in the room. I have witnessed that I don't get that in return from the current or the previous county, but I almost came into that. That was already something that had happened before I was even in office. There tend to be sort of a conflict between the cities and the counties. As far as state legislators, again, respect, keep the communication open. To everybody's surprise, I felt recently, since May, I've had a great relationship with the county commission chair and the state legislators. But obviously there's something going on in the background that I wasn't aware of, which is why we were all caught by surprise with the bills that have just been introduced. But even so, even when those bombs could get lobbed, it's important that you still take the high road and show them respect.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Marianne, it's the same thing as a municipality. You've got both county legislators and state legislators.
Right. Betsy alluded to the Sunshine Law. That is a very important law. I would like to say I find it interesting that all local officials have to abide by it, but your state legislators don't have to abide by it to conduct business in Tallahassee. If you are elected, you're elected to a group. Nobody gets elected king or queen, and you don't get a magic wand. It's important that you do have a respectful relationship with those that you serve with, because on the board that I serve, you got to be able to count to 3. If you don't get 3 votes, it doesn't go through. And I'm not saying that, you have to buddy somebody to get an idea through. What I'm saying is it's important to be able to understand that and to work together. And I don't think compromise is necessarily a dirty word, as long as you're not asking me to compromise any of my core values. Working with the state is a completely different ballgame because, number one, there's so many of them and you have to build coalitions to get things passed. I personally feel like I've had a very good relationship with the state representatives back in the day and currently. And I don't think it really has much to do with the fact that I was Bill Galvano's Lamaze instructor, but I have known them for years.
What kind of a child did he have?
Well, he had 3 children. He had 2 boys and a girl. Actually, I should say his wife had 2 boys. And a girl. I think Bill was there for the important part. But again, it's one of those things, getting to know someone. And I think it's important for all of us as citizens to get to know our elected officials, because conventional wisdom out there nowadays says everybody in office is corrupt. I had a campaign for an entire year that attacked me personally, attacked me by my age, attacked my weight, attacked my husband, and attacked my children. I honestly felt if I could reach out and speak with every single voter, they would probably say, she seems like a nice lady. She probably talks too much. I think she's going to try to get some things done. So again, compromise isn't dirty. Follow the sunshine law, but that doesn't mean you can't get to know personal things about the people you serve with and the other individuals that serve our community.
Thank you. Thank you. This has been a fantastic program today. Everybody, I really appreciate your input. It's been great. Andre was wonderful and Scott, as usual, is wonderful. So I thank you all for participating.